Imagine getting paid as a professional footballer without ever playing a single match, not one game, not 1 minute, not one touch of the ball. For over 20 years, one man signed contracts with some of the biggest clubs in Brazil: Flamengo, Botafogo, Fluminense, Vasco da Gama, partied with superstars, lived like a celebrity, and collected paychecks while doing absolutely nothing on the pitch. His name was Carlos Kaiser, and this is the story of the greatest con in football history. Carlos Henrique Raposo was born in 1963 in Porto Alegre, Brazil. Growing up, he loved football, but not in the way most kids did. He didn't love playing it. He loved the lifestyle around it, the fame, the money, the women, the parties. He had one problem. He wasn't very good. But here's what Carlos did have. He was tall, athletic, and looked exactly like a footballer. And more importantly, he had one of the most magnetic personalities you'll ever encounter. The man could walk into a room and make everyone believe whatever he wanted them to believe. So in 1979, at just 16 years old, he found his way into a training session for Puebla, a professional club in Mexico. He trained well enough to get signed, then immediately faked an injury to avoid ever playing a match, and got released. Most people would take that as a sign. Carlos took it as proof of concept. He returned to Brazil with a simple plan: befriend the right people, fake the rest, and never actually play football again. The first thing Kaiser understood was that football, like most industries, runs on connections. If the right person vouches for you, doors open. So he made it his full-time job to become best friends with the biggest names in Brazilian football. He got close to Carlos Alberto Torres, the legendary captain of Brazil's 1970 World Cup winning team. He befriended Renato Gaúcho, one of Brazil's most famous players. He socialized with Romário and Bebeto, two of the best strikers on the planet. These weren't casual acquaintances. These were genuine friendships, because Kaiser was genuinely fun to be around, charismatic, funny, loyal to his mates. And whenever he needed a new club, which was often, all he had to do was ask one of his famous friends to put in a word for him. A recommendation from a World Cup winner carries a lot of weight. Nobody asks too many questions. He'd show up to training, look the part, talk the talk, and then the excuses would begin. Over 2 decades, Kaiser built up an entire arsenal of ways to avoid playing football. The injury scam. Every time a match was coming up, Kaiser would suddenly develop a mystery injury, a pulled muscle, a dodgy knee. He became so good at faking injuries that clubs would keep him on the books for months, even years, waiting for him to recover. At one point, he reportedly paid youth team players to foul him in training, so he'd have a real visible injury to show the coaches. Think about that. He paid someone to hurt him, so he didn't have to play football. The fake phone call. During his time at Fluminense, Kaiser used to walk around with a toy mobile phone. This is the 1980s, remember? Mobile phones barely existed. He'd pretend to be fielding calls from other clubs, making himself look like a man in demand. When a club assistant caught him with the fake phone, he somehow managed to talk his way out of it. The grandmother trick. By his own admission, Kaiser's grandmother died multiple times. Different clubs, different years, always suspiciously timed around important matches. The red card. This one's our personal favorite. At Bangu, Kaiser was finally put on the pitch for a match, probably the coach was tired of waiting. Within minutes, Kaiser ran into the stands and started fighting with a fan, getting himself sent off before he'd even had to touch the ball properly. He later admitted the whole thing was staged. He'd rather get sent off than actually play. France. In 1990, Kaiser somehow landed a contract with Ajaccio, a club in Corsica, France. He played approximately 20 minutes of football in the entire time he was there. Mostly, he just enjoyed the French Riviera. While all this was going on, Kaiser was living like a genuine superstar. He'd show up to the best clubs in Rio de Janeiro, drop his footballer status, and have the time of his life. By his own admission, his words, not ours, he claimed to sleep with multiple women every single day. He once said, "I made sure I was seen with the greatest Brazilian footballers. Just being a football player made me a magnet." He partied alongside Romario. He shared dressing rooms with legends. He attended lavish events, drove nice cars, and lived in a city where being a professional footballer made you royalty. And none of it was paid for by him actually kicking a ball. His teammate Ricardo Rocha, a genuine World Cup winner, once said that in a competition for who could tell the most lies, even Pinocchio wouldn't beat Kaiser. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the game was changing. Football was becoming more professional. Clubs were doing more thorough background checks. The internet was arriving. You couldn't just have a mate vouch for you anymore. Kaiser's network was aging too. The old guard who'd looked after him were retiring. New coaches didn't know him. New executives wouldn't take a chance on a 35-year-old striker with a suspicious injury record and no footage of him playing. He quietly faded out of football, officially retiring, though whether he was ever really in it is debatable. Then in 2013, he went public. He gave interviews to Brazilian media and confessed everything. And instead of being condemned, he became a cult hero. A full documentary was made about him in 2018 called Kaiser, the greatest footballer never to play football. He did interviews around the world. He wrote an autobiography. He embraced the legend. He now trains female bodybuilders in Brazil, and by all accounts, he's absolutely loving life. Carlos Kaiser never scored a great goal, never won a trophy, never played a World Cup. But he did something arguably more impressive. He looked an entire industry in the eye for 20 years, smiled, and convinced them all he was something he wasn't. Whether you see him as a fraud or a genius probably says more about you than it does about him. One thing's for certain, though. There will never be another Carlos Kaiser. Because in the age of the internet, you wouldn't last 20 minutes. If you enjoyed this, subscribe. There are plenty more stories like this one. You just don't know about them yet.